woke up music. Yeah.
Like a money meeting, and I go ahead, Johnny.
Clothing trainer. Great word. These wretched acts. Lovely ladies are obviously here to eat.
That's fine. Voilà. Et bonjour. Vous pouvez dire voilà. Je dis des sous. No, I don't go one point. That's my name. One, yes, Gandhi.
Ah, I thought this one doesn't work.
Yeah.
Why are you pushing? I'm not going now.
I don't get money. I you decide.
Why can't Uncle na Davido ne. Is it a Musura government house? It's a party at government house. They have money now. She enough for that. She Uncle Limba, Jet Musura, she manager succeeding brother, she Senate. No.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening.
Okay, good. Welcome, everyone. Can we all make sure our phones are muted and our computers are muted?
Donated by the African Union. The donation of this much needed equipment was sequel to my visit to the African Union.
Can we all make sure that all our phones are muted? Can administrator make sure that mute everyone? I don't think I have the power to mute everyone.
We'll be out in 15.
All right. All right. Can everyone make sure their phone is muted?
Doesn't kill. She's eating again.
Yes. And for the RES.
Hello, Dr. Bello. Can you mute everybody, please? Except moderator. Please, can you mute everyone except the speaker and the moderator?
Can everyone, I think everyone's phone is muted.
My own view of me showing myself as a man. Mama, God forbid. I want to keep stories.
I may have to start calling out names and calling people to mute their phones. It's 12:05 or well 8:05 Nigerian time. We need to start. Okay. So I have a few names here whose phones are not muted. I have Amga Simon, Yusuf Augustine, Rashid Oyelade. Can you all make sure your phones are muted?
Israel's role with Hamas last year to the Gaza Strip and acknowledgement of Cairo role in the region.
Augustine, Yusuf Augustine, can you make sure your phone is muted?
To provide
Oh, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Did you hear my initial introduction? Okay, I'll start over. It's 8:08 Nigerian time, and so we have to start. We want to get this done in 1 hour. And so welcome everyone to our second module. And we have from the Endocrinology Pharmacists Association. We have prepared modules for diabetes management, and we are presenting at monthly cadence. And so this is our second module, and it's good to have everyone here. Our second speaker today is pharmacist Chinelo Okonkwo. She is the Deputy Assistant Director of Pharmaceutical Services and the head of the Clinical Pharmacy and Pharmacovigilance Unit in the Department of Pharmacy at National Hospital, Abuja. And I know that she's going to do justice to this topic of, I think our first topic is on prevention 1. So we have 2 modules on prevention, and she's going to be talking about nutrition and prevention of diabetes. Just as we have a bonus topic coming up in 2 weeks. So on July 30th, we have another topic, which is a bonus topic. We have a volunteer from the US who will be speaking to us on obesity and the management of obesity and obesity in diabetes. And so without much ado, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to pharmacist Chinelo Okonkwo. And I hope you have the ability to share your screen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwizu. My name is pharmacist Chinelo Okonkwo. I have a little challenge. They said only the host can share screen. So I need to be made host. I'm sorry, it's only the host that can share screen, so I'm having difficulty here.
Okay, hello everyone. I think the host is trying to work on that. Gotten in touch with me. He's presently working on that for you to be able to share the screen.
We should not waste my data anyhow. Some people connect and the thing is not going to.
Let her try now. Let her try and share now. Thomas is, can you try and share now?
Okay. Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Change your phone to landscape.
Okay.
Change your phone to landscape. To make it bigger. Change it. No, I mean your phone, not your phone. Just rotate it back. Okay.
Is it better now?
Okay, now better. Better
Dr.
now.
Bello,
Better
please, can you mute every other person, please?
Okay, we.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for.
Security agencies have not confirmed yesterday's kidnapping, but the Chancellor of Kafanchan Catholic Diocese, Reverend Father Emmanuel Okolo, explained to
So Dr. Chinelo, kindly unmute yourself, please. Kindly unmute yourself. Kindly unmute. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Hello,
you.
can
We
you
can
hear
hear you.
me? Okay, like I said, my name is Pharmacist Chinelo Okonkwo. I'll be discussing diabetes prevention, nutrition, and lifestyle modification. I would like to thank the organizers and CIPAN for inviting me to speak on this trending global issue, which is diabetes. And I'll be discussing nutrition and physical activities in diabetes prevention and management. And I'll also be discussing meal planning in line with basic food components and also food label. Like we all know, diabetes is a metabolic disease characterized by persistent rise in blood glucose, which is caused by multiple factors, including genetics, nutrition, environment, and physical activities. I'm aware that in the last lecture, we were exposed to the diagnostic features for diabetes. We were given parameters with glycosylated hemoglobin, fasting, and oral glucose tolerance test that is indicative of diabetes. So I won't be going into those details now. I'll just focus on the nutrition and other lifestyle modifications. So diabetes arise when there is a persistent rise in blood glucose. In the short term, what we see is hyperglycemia and dyslipidemia. And in the long term, the patient comes down with complications which include retinopathy, neuropathy, nephropathy, and cardiovascular disease. So diabetes have different types, like type 1 diabetes, which is basically an autoimmune mediated destruction of the pancreatic beta cells. In this case, you have insulin deficiency or absolute lack. But in type 2 diabetes, which accounts for like 90 to 95% of cases, it's a progressive loss of insulin secretion. In this time around, we have insulin resistance. The insulins that are secreted does not have optimal performance. And this type 2 diabetes accounts for the whole epidemic in diabetes figures. Is that type 2 diabetes, which is preventable, that accounts for the majority of the cases we have in the world on diabetes. We also have gestational diabetes, which occurs between the 24 to 28 weeks of gestation in pregnant women. In other words, if the blood glucose is noted high before 24 weeks, it means the person probably had diabetes without knowing. So it only happens from the 24th week of pregnancy. But pre-diabetes is diagnosed when there is persistent high in blood glucose, which is below 5 before, which is higher than 5.5 and is below 6.5. In this case, it is high. It's high above normal, but it's not high enough for the person to know that he's diabetic. And at this stage, it can be delayed or prevented completely from developing into diabetes. Globally, looking at the diabetic atlas from the International Diabetic Federation, like in 2013, it was postulated that 382 million adults were living with diabetes. It was also projected that in about 20 years to come from 2013, the world would have had 592 million people suffering diabetes. But unfortunately, as the year goes by, we have this data keep increasing. We have people overshooting this target by WHO. So in 2021, it was discovered that 537 million adults live with diabetes, which is very close to 2035 target in 2013. And in 2030, less than 10 years to come, we have almost 1 billion people living with diabetes. So this is very outrageous statistics and it calls for serious attention. It's also reported that 6.7 million people died of diabetes in 2021, which shows that it's a serious epidemic and that one person dies of diabetes every 5 seconds. If you want to know whether this data is correct, you can, if you work in a tertiary hospital, you'll find out that almost all adult patients have underlying diabetes. So in Africa, more than 50% of people living with diabetes are undiagnosed. The reason being that diabetes is usually asymptomatic at the early stages. So most people don't know that they have it. This calls for outreaches like screening people to let them know that they have diabetes in order to prevent the prevalence of diabetes. In Nigeria, type 2 diabetes is also on the rise. But the problem here is that we do not have a current evidence-based epidemiological reports to show the actual estimate of the burden of disease in Nigeria. We don't have like countrywide surveys to tell us the degree of the diabetes burden in Nigeria. Now, why do we want to talk about nutrition and lifestyle modification? This is because there is overwhelming evidence that shows that lifestyle changes, which includes physical activities, health diets improvements, and weight loss improvements, that this evidence shows that these lifestyle changes will prevent diabetes from occurring and can reduce the rate of occurrence with 58% in people with already impaired glucose tolerance. In other words, if you have glucose tolerance, impaired glucose tolerance, the patient may most likely suffer diabetes in the long run. And at this stage, it can be prevented. So lifestyle changes have also been found to mitigate the effects of genes on diabetes risk for type 1 diabetes. From this diagram here, it is important to know that energy balance plays a key role in development of diabetes. What it says here is that the amount of energy intake should balance energy expenditure. So diabetes develops progressively as a complex interaction between insulin resistance and beta cell function. Here, we have to note that if the positive energy balance is higher than, if there's a positive energy balance whereby the energy intake is higher than expenditure, we will end up with diabetes, overweight, or obesity. But when there's a negative energy balance, like I have on the picture, what you are seeing is weight loss because the expenditure is higher. The person is engaged in more activities, exercises, or calorie burning mechanisms. That will result to weight loss. So it's very simple that the interventions you do can prevent overweight and also prevent obesity and prevent diabetes. We would like to talk about nutrition and prevention of diabetes intertwined with healthy dietary practices and obesity. Along the line, I'll be combining them. So we know the WHO promotes balanced meal. And this balanced meal, when we have patients before us, we need to understand the culture, the environment, the work pattern, the lifestyle, and other factors before we can encourage our patients to be on a healthy diet. Diabetes, we know, is directly linked to carbohydrates, lipid, and protein metabolism. As a result, nutrition forms an integral part of diabetes management and self-management education. In diabetes, like I explained in the energy balance, the input is actually the calories we build, the food we take, because when you have food being metabolized, you have glucose in the blood, and the insulins are sensitized to mop them up and store them in the adipose tissues or in the liver or muscles. But when there is deficiency of the insulin to work optimally, you now have diabetes. So nutrition is very important in the prevention of diabetes. A healthy diet, of course, is one that will protect against malnutrition in any form, as well as also prevent non-communicable diseases like diabetes, heart diseases, stroke, and cancer. I would like us to focus more on Nigerian diets because as we are Nigerians, we will come across patients who will need assistance on how to actually balance their meal, especially diabetic patients. So WHO recommends a very healthy diet, especially for diabetic patients. In this, it says the patient should eat fruits, vegetables, legumes, which consist of lentils and beans, nuts. Nuts includes peanuts, cashew nuts, hazelnuts, whole grains. In this case, you have the person is encouraged to eat these things every day. So your meal should comprise of fruits, vegetables, grains, which are in this category of unprocessed maize, millet, oats, or wheat, or rice, whichever, every day. The WHO recommends 2 cups of fruits, which is 4 servings, or 2.5 cups of vegetables, which is 5 servings. I would like us to pay attention to the servings and the cups. You see, like, it's almost like a cup is per serving. Some people mix up the servings and the portions. They can also be interchanged. So you're expected to eat 4 cups, that's 4 servings. Then 180 grams of grains, 160 grams of meat and beans or red meat. Okay, red meat should be taken 1 to 2 times per week, and poultry 2 to 3 times per week. So we also expected to eat 400 grams or 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. Meanwhile, potatoes, sweet potatoes, cassava, or other starchy foods, they are not classified as fruits or vegetables. I need to point out this because in West Africa, we really have so many tubers as part of our diet. So we need to work on what is required for a healthy diet, in as much as we take our staple food. Looking at our portion size or serving, like I said, sometimes they're interswitched, but a portion could be what you eat at one time, or maybe serving can be specific amount of food, like a slice of bread and maybe 1 cup of milk. But in some food packages, they interchange them. Looking at the diagram I also have to the right, it will help us also understand the servings and the portions. When we see 3 ounces of meat, fish or poultry, we mean the palm of the hand where there is no fingers. You see number 1 on the diagram. Take note that the line starts from the last digit and it's a straight line. It's not curved. It also goes down and it's a straight line. That means the palm, inside of the palm, that means that's signifies 3 ounces of meat that should be taken, or 1 ounce of meat. The measurement is from the thumb to the tip of the base. The tip of the base of the thumb, that's 1 ounce. Then 1 cup or one medium fruit is when your hand, when you place your hand like a fist in the figure denoting 3. When you have 1 to 2 ounces of nuts, it also means when the hand is cupped, like in number 4. That's the measurement for 1 to 2 ounces of nuts. 1 tablespoon means the thumb tip to the first joint, while 1 teaspoon is the fingertip to the first joint. So if we're talking about 1 teaspoon of salt and you want to take the measurement without weighing it, you are looking at the fingertip at number 6 there. WHO also recommends for a healthy diet to limit sugars to less than 10% of total energy intake, which is equivalent to 50 grams or about 12 level teaspoonfuls per day. For a healthy body weight, consuming about 2,000 calories per day. This calories is usually plus or minus. 2,000 is recommended. Like for women, you can have 2,000 per day, but for men, they need higher calories, which goes for between 2,200 to 3,500. Or for ideal body weight for men, 2,500 calories. Then we should also limit fat intake to less than 30% of total energy intake from fats. When we look at fats, the World Health Organization has tried to classify fat to saturated fats, unsaturated fats, trans fats, and so on. So in this fat intake, we should consume less than 10% of total energy intake for saturated fats. But for trans fats, which comprise of hydrogenated fats, it should be less than 1% of total energy intake because trans fat is not good for the health. We should also limit salt intake to less than 5% gram of salt. We should limit salt intake to less than 5% gram of salt, which is equivalent to 1 teaspoon per day. All these measurements I've been talking about, you will come across them from the food labels, which we see in the supermarkets. To understand food labels, if you look at this diagram, you see that they're in different colors. Like the first color, which is blue, is telling for this label, you have 4 servings per container. But for the serving size, each cup weighs 227 grams. If you're going to have like four servings, what you will end up with will be 227 times 4. And you should calculate it based on your daily calories, which is targeted at 2,000. So that will give you an estimate of how much the whole pack contains. The whole pack contains 4 servings. So if you have 227, you multiply by 4 to know what the whole pack contains. Then the second part, the pink part area, talks about calories, which is 280. So this was what I was trying to point out when I mentioned 2,000. Then the yellow part is actually talking about the parts that should be watched out for. The part you should limit. You have total fats, saturated fats, trans fats, it means avoid. These areas avoid. Then total carbohydrates, you will see where you have dietary fiber, total sugars, added sugars, because WHO has not classified carbohydrates so that you don't mention them as a whole. Because inside it, you have dietary fiber, which is good, and then you have free sugars, which is also not too good for diabetics. Then below it, you now have protein, the protein content, the vitamins or minerals, which are like supplements to support healthy living. Below it are some footnotes, which also add 1 or 2 values on the food label. We also have number 4, the purple line, which talks about the daily value, percentage daily value. If you look at it, if you have less than 5% for the things you don't need, the saturated fats, it means that you are on target, it is recommended. But for the ones you need, like the fibers, you should be more than 20%. Anything above 20% is high, anything below 5% is low. So for the ones you don't need, you should target 5%, below 5%. From this label, you see that saturated fat is 23%, which is too much. While the salt there, the sodium there, I don't know if you can see it. The sodium there is very high. It's 37%. So it's too high. With this food label, it means that you should avoid food containing these amounts. We can also use the plate method in recommending food for diabetic patients. The WHO also says if you use a flat plate, which is if you put an envelope, this official envelope, 9-inch envelope on the plate, it gives you a measurement of which half of the plate should contain non-starchy vegetables, excluding those tubers. Then 1/4 of the plate should be filled with lean protein, and the other quarter should be filled with carbohydrates, like the unprocessed grains that we have. Then in place of drink, we should use water for the meals. I hope this is clear. Okay, so another important thing to talk about is the diabetes planning. There should be a meal plan before the meal. Like I see patients in the hospital, I work for a tertiary institution. We see that diabetic patients are very stubborn. Some of them are very difficult to deal with. They understand what it means to measure their blood glucose. Some of them that want to be discharged, you will see them starve themselves for a very long time and they request for the blood glucose to be taken. They start worrying either the pharmacist or the nurse to come and take it after they have starved for a very long time. So sometimes the fasting blood glucose becomes higher than random because this patient understands the technique that when there is hypoglycemia, the blood glucose will be low. When there is hyperglycemia, it will be high. So a meal plan is very important in counseling patients because the patient will go home and work on it so that the patient doesn't come back to the hospital with complications. The meal plan is a guide for when, what, and how much to eat to get the nutrition you need while keeping the blood sugar at optimal levels. So a meal plan will consider the taste, lifestyle, the medicines the person is taking. You know, Nigerians like herbs a lot. They like smoothies, they like herbal products. Like sometimes we're counseling a patient on drugs. You will know the patient is taking supplements. There are very common ones they take that interfere with their medication and their diet. So we need to watch out for all that. So the carbohydrate we eat in the food can raise blood pressure, and it depends on the state we find it. For instance, if a patient is drinking fruit juice, it will raise that blood sugar faster than eating a whole fruit because a whole fruit will take time for digestion and absorption. And also when you eat the carbohydrate with other food condiments like protein, fats, and other things, it slows down digestion, so the blood glucose doesn't rise very fast. Let's take a look at foods with lower risk of diabetes. Monounsaturated fatty acids are recommended, and we'll find this in olives, peanuts, avocado, hazelnuts, fish, almonds. We also see omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which is recommended. We find these ones too in corn oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, walnuts. There are many studies to support the fact that these polyunsaturated fatty acids are very beneficial in lowering the risk of diabetes. The diet that is rich in fiber is also recommended. Here you find oats, whole grains, wheat, and unprocessed grains. You also see lean protein. In this case, for you to have your poultry or animal protein, you may need to remove the skin or remove the fat physically, or by steaming, which after it has cooled down, you can easily remove the fat. Then legumes like lentils and beans are recommended. Studies also show that caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee, lower risk of diabetes. Whole fruits as well, some minerals as well. Some vitamins have no effect, either positive or negative. That has not been justified. There are foods too that increase the risk of diabetes, and this has to do with processed grains. You can see there is an increase in urbanization, and that affects what we eat. So processed grains like white flour, white rice, and so on affects the food we eat. Then the processed red meat as well. These ones, you find them in hot dogs, sausages, and so on. We also have sugar-sweetened beverages, whether carbonated or non-carbonated soft drinks, energy drinks, sports drink, and so on. Flavored water. They all have high risk of diabetes, including alcohol consumption above 50 g per day in women and above 60 in men. This alcohol has like a U-shaped pattern, which studies have shown that there are some levels which do not increase the risk of diabetes. There are some levels that also increase the risk of complications, comorbidities, and other complications with diabetes. So moderation is the key here when we are eating food, meals. We also have trans fatty acids like hydrogenated fats, margarines, deep fried foods, and so on, which are also not recommended. Then higher iron stores. High iron stores can be found in some foods like kidney, liver, or red meat. So these ones increase the risk of diabetes. Taking a look at our Nigerian meals, because the essence of knowing this lecture, this discussion, is to be able to carry it on before our patients. If you're in the community pharmacy, you will see these patients come to you all the time, who, like some of the patients we see in the hospitals, will tell you that they're very adherent with their medication, they do exercise, they do everything, but their blood glucose remains high. It's also a problem, like when we see children of 6 years who come down with diabetes, because children are in their active life. They play a lot in schools. So to manage their diet, manage the physical activity, manage the medication is always a challenge. So it's better to understand this so that we can counsel patients better. For our Nigerian diet, our breakfast usually is laden with fried foods, fried egg, fried dodo, and so on. So it is recommended, in as much as the patient is going to switch from the non-healthy diet to a healthy diet, because you have to work out a plan with your patient so that the patient can cooperate. Because no matter how well you mean for your patient, the patient may go home without doing whatever you advise him to do and come back with more problems. So for patients who are on Nigerian diet, if you look at this diet from what WHO recommended, it is easier to to reduce the portions as recommended. Half a plate for carbs, half a plate for proteins, and quarter of a plate for carbohydrates, quarter of a plate for proteins, then half a plate for veggies and fruits. So for the breakfast, the patient needs fruits by the side, according to the recommendation. The patient also needs to attach lettuce, tomatoes, cucumber, or what we have available, carrots, in addition to the precious meal the patient enjoys. This is also part of Nigerian meal, because introducing a completely foreign diet to a patient in Nigeria may not also go well. Patient may also not be able to afford it. So we need to use the plate pattern to portion how this patient gets their meal. The issue here in nutrition transition is that the increase in urbanization and industrialization have introduced, including sedentary occupations, have increased computerization, mechanization, and improved transportation. They all affect diabetes management because at this stage, most people are tending into waking up, sitting down before their phones, before televisions, before movies, before the computer, doing nothing. So for a patient who has this type of occupation, it's recommended that after every 30 minutes, you can stand up, take a walk for 4 or 5 minutes, come down, continue sitting. This will help the diabetic patient to reduce the sedentary lifestyle and increase physical activity. There's also drastic change in food production and food processing due to urbanization. And you see vendors who deliver meal around. So your meal comes to you packaged. For patients whose nature of work allow them to buy food from fast foods or eat outside, it's advised that as they buy their meal, they take a portion of that meal, they do a takeaway that they will take home and then add all those things, carrots and vegetables that are not found in such restaurants. In fact, if you travel outside to most countries, even in their eateries, let me take, for example, like in Brazil, where the food is served, it is weighed. You weigh, when they weigh the food, you pay according to the weight. So there are a lot of varieties for you to choose from before you can have your meal. But Nigerian restaurant is yet to adopt that type, apart from maybe some fast foods that are weighed or chocolates. Nigerian restaurants are yet to adopt the issue of having varieties with fresh fruits and vegetables. So the key components here in the food chain is the saturation of chain supermarkets. You know, there are lots of preservatives in foods in the supermarket. That's the only way those foods can remain on the shelf. We have high energy snacks, sugary beverages. So for diabetic patients, they have to cut down on those foods that are not recommended by WHO. Looking at obesity and physical activity, it is a kind of reversible effect in which physical inactivity or obesity will lead to insulin resistance by increasing non-physiological deposition of the fat in the muscles, hepatic and visceral tissues, and also causing intercellular sequestration of glucose transporter 4 in unexercised muscle. But on the other hand, physical activity will reduce the insulin resistance and promote free fatty acid oxidation, reduce lipotoxicity in skeletal muscles and liver, and indirectly by reducing visceral fat. So when somebody exercises, you have a kind of burning of fats. There is catabolism going on to supply energy to the tissues. But when somebody is not exercising, what you have is the storage remains intact and there will be free fatty acids in circulation. You have the cytokines and oxidative stress that will increase apoptosis of the cells, which may impair insulin's ability and eventually cell death. So exercise increases glucose uptake by the muscles, which can last where there's insulin sensitivity up to 3 days. But for diabetic patients, maybe within 24 to 48 hours. Excess adiposity reflected by higher body mass index is a very strong risk factor for diabetes. So it's important for the pharmacist to also know the body mass index for underweight, overweight, or obese patients and counsel accordingly, of which 18.5 to 24.9 is a normal range. Then for obesity starts from 30 and above. We would like to talk about physical activity, but before I continue, I don't know, maybe we have any question or somebody wants to need clarification. Okay, can I go ahead? I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you very well, Fanchinelo. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So physical activity includes all movements that increases energy use. Any form of movement that is done is called physical activity. You can sit down while you wind your muscles, your joints, your fingers, is physical activity. You can lie down while you move from left to right, lift your limbs is physical activity. You can move from one position to the next position, covering a distance. That's physical. Anything that requires energy use is physical activity. Then exercise is a planned, structured physical activity. Because you often hear people say, if it is exercise you're talking about, that the kind of work they do is enough exercise. But when you are doing exercise, the brain is at rest, the calculation is focused on your movements, and it also goes with relaxation. Even though there may be increased heart rate, increased blood circulation, increased heat, and so on. But when people are stressed of doing strenuous work, like during cultivation or during cutting of things, painting and other work, that is not an exercise. Exercise is a planned, structured physical activity. It's different from when somebody is taking a walk. Exercise improves blood glucose in type 2 diabetes because of glucose uptake by the muscles during exercise. It also reduces cardiovascular risk factors, contributes to weight loss, and improves overall well-being. So regular exercise has considerable health benefits for people with type 1 diabetes as well, because there's improved cardiovascular fitness, muscle strength, and insulin sensitivity, as I've been explaining since. So exercise may prevent type 2 development when it is regular. Like it's always said that exercise is a free medicine. We have different types of exercise or physical activities. We have the aerobics, which involves the burning of more of glucose, that requires more oxygen during aerobics. Examples are like walking, cycling, swimming, jogging, and then it's like involves repeated continuous movement of your large muscles. That is aerobic exercise. The resistance, which is like strength training, involves exercises of free weight, where you have like contraction of muscles. You have weight, using weight machines, body weight, or elastic resistance bands. Some people use elastic bands, stretching them and returning them. These are called resistance training or strength training. We also have flexibility exercises, which improve range of motion around the joints, like some stretches as well. We have balance exercises for posture and gait. When you want to prevent fall, you use balance. They also have exercises like Tai Chi yoga. Tai Chi and yoga combine both flexibility, balance, as well as resistance activities. Looking at the benefits of exercise, as you can see somebody here in this picture doing aerobic exercise. The aerobic training increases mitochondrial density, insulin sensitivity, because you know the mitochondrium is the energy-giving part of the cell, is a kind of a cell organelle responsible for respiration. So it increases that density. It improves lung function, improves immune function, oxidative enzymes, and then cardiac output. Aerobic exercise is very good for people who can tolerate it, because these things have to be checked before the patient starts the exercise. Moderate to high volume of aerobic activities are associated with low cardiovascular risk and overall mortality, low mortality risk in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. For type 1 aerobic training, it increases cardiorespiratory fitness and decreases insulin resistance. Individuals with type 2 also benefit from regular training because it will reduce their glycosylated hemoglobin, triglycerides, blood pressure, and insulin resistance as well. Resistance exercise benefits. In this case too, resistance exercise can assist in minimizing risk of exercise-induced hypoglycemia and type 1 diabetes, because sometimes patients combine aerobics and resistance exercises. People who go for training, sometimes they ask you to do the aerobics first. After the aerobics, they will not tell you that the muscles are well dilated, so you can now do your stretching exercises. But for diabetes, it is recommended for them to do the resistance exercises first before aerobics to reduce the incidence of hypoglycemia. If the patient does it vice versa, aerobic exercise first, it actually drops the hypoglycemia, and which is a danger for both cases. Resistance training benefits for individuals with type 2 diabetes also include improvement in glycemic control as well as insulin resistance. Then benefits of other types of exercises. You have stretching exercise, which increases range of motion around the joints and flexibility, but this does not affect glycemic control. Then for balance training, this one reduces risk of fall because patient is trying to improve balance and gait, even when there is peripheral neuropathy. They don't affect glycemic control. Management of food and insulin with physical activity. To prevent hypoglycemia during exercise, especially when it is beyond 30 minutes, it is expected that the patient will take carbohydrates, increase the intake of carbohydrates, or the patient will reduce insulin that is required at that moment. For low to moderate intensity exercise, like if the exercise is going to last beyond 30 minutes or up to 60 minutes, every hour, the patient is expected to check his blood glucose and take at least about 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrates to prevent hypoglycemia. Then for activities where the patient is on insulin, patient has just taken a bolus of insulin, patient is expected to take 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates before the exercise. This is the same amount that's also given to athletes, whether they have diabetes or not. 30 to 60 grams carbohydrates per hour of the exercise. Recommendations for physical activities for diabetes patients. This includes daily exercise, at least not allowing more than 2 days to elapse between exercise sections. And for structured lifestyle interventions that include at least 150 minutes per week. That's doing 30 minutes for 5 days of physical activity. The recommendation for this will create dietary, will cause like 5 to 7% weight loss. This is also recommended in type 2 diabetes, especially where there is the risk is very high, 1 to 50 minutes per week. Then there's also, like I said, frequent blood glucose check is required to implement how much carbohydrate should be taken, and then insulin dose adjustments as well. We also have lifestyle modification strategies. These strategies prevent patients from developing type 2 diabetes or from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes, or reducing the incidence of complications. One is education and counseling on lifestyle modification for optimal glucose control. The other is adoption of behavioral change strategies. Then after a while, you're expected to review those goals. The use of step counters or pedometers is a typical example of behavior change tool. People who wear devices that monitor their steps, it helps them because it only gives you a prompt that you haven't done well or you have done well. The apps also congratulate somebody. We have so many apps. We have Virgin Pulse, we have Fitbit, we also have Google Fit app. If you cannot download the other ones, Google has its own that monitors the pedometers. Some devices are ones specifically for that, while some phones come with inbuilt health checks. It is recommended that you set a goal of 10,000 steps per day. This will help you to strive to get above 7,500 steps per day, rather than checking and putting 5,000 steps per day, because this may not really have much impact in your lifestyle change. Lifestyle change modifications also include technology-based strategies. For adults with type 2 diabetes, we can use internet-delivered physical activity promotion. Sometimes people log on in some apps that give you feedback, that allow you to set goal, remind you to increase your goal. Sometimes you get a life coach on phone or from the app through emails, encouraging you and monitoring your physical activity. Where benefit outweighs risk, a bariatric or metabolic surgery may be recommended for those whose diabetes, whose BMI is above 35 kilograms per meter squared. So adopting a healthy diet approach is also very important here. For the role of a pharmacist in using in lifestyle modification, the pharmacist can use a 5A model approach as recommended by WHO. That is to assess, advise, agree, assist, and arrange. You assess these patients physical activity or the diet behavior so that you can determine if it is safe for the patient to engage in physical activity. Then you advise the patient on potential benefits of making lifestyle modifications. You also identify them and share with the patient. Then you agree with this patient on the lifestyle goals. You start slow, go slow, help the patient, encourage and monitor. So you agree with this patient on how to create a plan that will help him to achieve it. You also assist the patient in developing strategies to overcome the problems or the barriers identified, as well as helping the patient to develop an action plan. Then finally, you arrange for follow-up assessments. You arrange to support, then you arrange to solve any problem as it arises. I have this case study here. This patient is AY, is a non-diabetic patient, and this patient is a friend to his pharmacist who complained of generalized body weakness. This patient claims to be adherent to his medications and then invited the pharmacist to bring a stronger drug for him to manage his weakness. The patient is complaining of generalized body weakness and wants the pharmacist, who is a friend of his, to bring a strong medication to manage his weakness. What would you recommend for this patient? Meeting him with his meal below, with the alcohol by his right, with his fast food, and then with the way you are seeing the patient. Maybe during interactive session, we may have 1 or 2 recommendations for this patient. In summary, lifestyle intervention programs promoting healthy diets, physical activity, and modest body weight reductions can prevent or delay the onset of diabetes among high-risk patients. So individuals at risk need education, they need access to ongoing support, and they also need an adequate environment to engage in health-enhancing behaviors. Healthcare practitioners as well, like pharmacists and the health system too, can contribute by providing individual counseling, establishing referral systems where you can't handle, you have to refer, make recommendations, and at the same time, you can introduce health information technologies to screen for unhealthy behaviors or deliver interventions. These are my references. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Oh. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Pharmacist Chinelo. That was an excellent presentation, very rich in information. And I had a question. I had asked people to type their questions in the chat box, and somebody wanted to know, when you mean cup, which kind of cup are you talking about? So when you say 1 cup, how do you, is it the cigarette cup that they use in measuring gari, or is it the glass of, what is cup? What does that mean?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. So the cup that can be used in measuring, like I showed a picture of the fist. When the fist is standing up, that size should be the size of the cup. I don't know if I should go back to the slide or I should stop sharing. The size of the fist is like the measurement of the cup. If you have any cup with that length, it gives you an idea. Otherwise, because it was not specified if it should be 150 mils or 250 mils, but the size of the fist, which is available even for people in the villages or remote areas, they can easily use the size of the fist to know the measurement of the cup.
Yeah, I think for our patients, I think the most practical thing is what you shared with us, using your fist to measure and to estimate what a cup looks like. We're going to show, somebody asked another question. Can you repeat the slide about the, Can you repeat the slide about the product composition? Is basmati rice, yam flour, plantain flour okay for diabetic patients or a patient that wants to prevent diabetes? So I think maybe we'll share the slides on the platform, on the endocrinology platform. If you can address the second question about basmati rice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma. I forgot to mention that in Nigeria, diabetic patients suffer unhealthy diets. People tell that diabetic patients to take unripe plantain. They take only unripe plantain and small portion of any sauce. They take only sweet potatoes as their major meal. They don't take any other thing. So it is important for us to know that unprocessed grains, whole grains, are very good. Like I mentioned about food labels, I know that basmati rice is a foreign rice. I haven't taken my time to actually compare, but I will advise us to always look at the labels to see if we can actually know what it contains before we recommend.
Okay.
But for diabetic patients, a whole lot of balance compared to what you usually take. I don't know if I got the second question.
I just wanted to add, so I love basmati rice because it comes out grainy when you cook it. The caloric content is not different from the other rice. I think the reason I like it is because of how grainy it comes out. If you just can tell patients, keep your rice serving to a fistful size, or if you use the plate diet, I think that's something that is easy for everybody to estimate. Your half of your plate should be vegetables, a quarter should be carbohydrate, and use your fist. Any serving, whether it's by you eat or whatever it is, keep it a fistful size, and the other quarter should be protein. You wouldn't go wrong. So when it comes to measurement, you have to also remember that your typical patient is not very literate, or even if they are literate, that mental, you want to eat, you start calculating. It gets after a year or two, people just drop it. So just use rough estimate. Half of your plate is vegetables. And in a fistful size of carbohydrate, that would be a slice of yam, that would be a slice of bread, or maybe 2 slices of bread. That would be just 2 spoons of rice, will give you a fistful size. That would be a pack of Indomie. If you look at the plate she just the slide that is up now, if you look at the one on her back, the eba is a bit too big, because it's more than a fistful size. But I like the soup because it's okra, and it has, you can see, is a lot of vegetables. So you want to do, just bulk up. So the soups like okra, soups like onubu, soups like vegetable soup, all those things are very high in and then you just keep your eba or pounded yam to a fistful size. When I make my gari, if I get a fistful size, would be about a cup of gari, a cup maybe plus half, not a cup, sorry, a third of a cup, or a third to half of a cup will give you a fistful size. If you make it the eba style, where it's not, you're turning it, you find out that it's bulky, it has more water, it's more, you feel like you're eating more, but your quantity is still the same. So just knowing the tricks about how to make our food more diabetic friendly is important.
Okay, thank you, Ma. At least it will have high fiber content. So, Ma, can I stop sharing now?
Go ahead. I don't know if we answered the question about, basmati rice. Somebody asked about basmati rice, yam flour, plantain flour. Are they okay? If you can just address that. I think you have already.
Okay, the yam flour does not have much fiber. The plantain flour, because it's low calorie food, that is why they usually ask them to take it. Like I mentioned, they always tell diabetic patients to eat plantain flour. instead of focusing on what WHO has recommended, which should be unprocessed grains, whole grains. It is better to advise the patient to go on whole grains. And then some of these, sometimes they ask them to take only wheat, which may have high gluten level. Some people are allergic to gluten, some are not allergic to gluten. I think the focus should be on unprocessed grains or whole grain than processed ones.
Thank you, Fam Chinelo. I have another question, and somebody wanted some clarification about fish sizes. Somebody said fish sizes are different. Yes. And when I talk to my patients about fish sizes, some of them are really big. I'm like, not your size of fish, my size of fish. Or maybe if they have a wife, I say, measure with your wife. So it's just the average and not obese person's size of fish is what they will use. And people know, unless they're trying to mischievous, they know when their size of fish is not what you use to measure.
Ma, if I may add, because I spoke to a professor of endocrinology here in Nigeria before this lecture, these fish, sometimes there's this speculation by cardiologists that the size of your fist is the size of your heart. So if the person focuses on the size of the fist, even plus or minus, you won't get it that bad. When it is bad is when it's double the size of the fist, 3/4 extra, and so on. It's just an idea.
Yes. Because diabetes is a long-term, is a chronic condition. So I try, my goal is not to make it too technical for patients. You know, a cup of this, it makes sense in theory, but when a cup of this, half a teaspoonful of this, how many grams of this, I try not to make it too technical because this is a lifelong journey. As long as they know how to read the food labels, and they are able to, like for those of them who eat processed food, look at the food label, understand how to read it and what it means, and then just go with for people who are just cooking their food, just go with the diabetes plate, and that, or if they are not able to do any of these things, there are people things like okra soup. That when you cook okra soup, by the next day, when NEPA takes light, is not tasting as good. So it's hard to maintain. So some of the things that we're saying to do is hard to maintain and run a normal life. So we work with portion control, but we have to tailor advice to patients based on where they find themselves and what they can afford to do, instead of coming with technical language and trying to make it on these things unreachable. Yes, I like what Dr. Chinelo said about, even if nothing else can be done, can we work on portion control? And if that's what we're working on, that's still good enough. The other question we have, and I'm going to stop taking questions in 5 minutes because we had promised that we'd keep our presentation to an hour. So we want to be mindful of everybody's time. But the other question that we have is the common foods that we see around watermelon, banana, apple, pineapple. These patients worry about if they can take them or not. So watermelon, banana, apples, and pineapple. Fam Chinelo.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. For WHO recommendation on fruits, because some people also say take supplements, vitamin C, vitamin E, antioxidants, it will help. But there is no study to justify how much those fruits will help. WHO encourages whole fruits. The watermelon, which is not in the juicy form, because if it's in the juice form, it will increase hypoglycemia instantly. But when it is whole fruits, they are okay. The patient has to manage the glycemic index with what the patient is taking. Of course, patient has to check his blood glucose. If it's uncontrolled, patient has to come down with those fruits because they have high fructose content. It's better when it's sucrose, like starch. Starch is polysaccharide. I mean, it doesn't have free glucose easily. So it takes time before it breaks down. It doesn't shoot up the blood glucose very high. That's why they tell them to cut down on fruits. But fruits are very good because you get micronutrients from them. It's recommended to be part of the diet. Patient can be on whether natural or artificial, honey or sugar. Those immediate sugars will definitely increase the blood glucose. So moderation is key, and taking them has to be in line with the blood glucose, not because WHO recommends fruits and vegetables, then the patient has to be on them when the blood glucose is too high without regulating them. Also, I want to also point out that the cereals that we have high fiber content, even more than the fruits. So the patient can get, what fibers do is that they are not easily absorbed. So they slow digestion, they are not easily absorbed. Patient eats and patient is full, but the patient does not get too much into the blood. And that helps with weight neutral. So fruits are recommended, but the person has to make sure that the fructose he's getting from the fruits does not affect his blood glucose. Thank you, Ma.
Somebody's talked about, can you please talk about the frequency of high glycemic foods, even when it is eaten using a diet plate of WHO?
Okay, there are foods with high glycemic index and there are foods with high glycemic load. The foods with high glycemic index are foods containing sugars. If you look at like the label I was showing, you see that the carbohydrate has been specified. Sometimes the sugar is added. You see it on the label as added sugar. Sometimes something like milk now. Milk is categorized as a carbohydrate because it has lactose, which is sugar. So the foods with high glycemic, like yam, have high glycemic index. It's not easy to list a range of foods that have that. But what tell us is that foods that have high fiber content have low glycemic index. But starchy foods that have foods that have high sugar, free sugars, carbonated waters, they have high glycemic index and they're not recommended. I don't know if I'm addressing that question well.
Yes, so does anybody have any comments? Okay. Does anybody have any comments? All right. So yes, we have to draw you have to draw a distinction between high glycemic index and high glycemic content. So the index is the ones that are quick sources of sugar. They shoot it up like quickly and they're high. And then, you know, most carbohydrates have high glycemic content. And so you want to avoid, especially for people who have poorly controlled diabetes, you want to avoid those high index foods because they, you know, they are foods that your body is not working so hard to process and then just do a sugar dump. And so for patients here, I say anything white bread, white rice, white pasta, cake, ice cream, all those things, the body is not working hard to, they just give you a sugar dump. You want your body to work hard, you know, and that is why the foods that have fiber are better, because your body is working hard to, and so the release of the sugar is slower and it doesn't give you a sugar dump. So I think that's the thing. But I'm mindful of the fact that, you know, all these technical terms mean nothing and confuse and complicate life for our patients. This is a lifelong journey. So you want to make sure, number one, before you say this is what you should do, how many grams of carbohydrate or what you should do, you want to understand what the patient is currently doing and what is feasible for the patient. No matter how much we know, WHO will recommend, ADA will recommend, they will give you the number of grams, they will calculate and they'll give it to you. It has to translate to what the patient can do. If they, and not just do what the patient can do and sustain. You know, it's not just advising and saying this is I'm quoting and giving them, it makes life more difficult. You want to make sure that they're successful. So looking at what they are currently doing and then finding a way to modify it is the way to go. So it's 1:13. I want to thank pharmacist Chinelo for such an excellent job and for bringing this to light and for educating us. And we will share her slides on the platform and so that everybody can access it. Sometimes when we talk, we forget, but when we have those resources to always look back on, we remember. Our next topic will be on the 30th of July, and that will be, like I said, a bonus topic. I want to thank you. I know that I recognize that the NAPSA president was here earlier and she's had to leave. I forgot to recognize her, and I want to thank her for joining us. I do not see any other CPAN. I thought I saw CPAN president. I want to recognize him and thank him for joining us. I hope this was beneficial and useful. Like I said, we'll share the slides, and you can reach us if you have any more questions. Thank you so much, Chinelo, and I enjoyed your conversation.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you, CPAN.